Okay. Okay. Yes. As we were saying, sensitivity analysis is once we've solved the linear programming problem, we need to examine what are the assumptions we have made in formulating the problem. Now, what are some of these assumptions? Well, for example, in a typical product mix problem, we assume different things about profit contributions of different products. That's an assumption. Similarly, we assume that we had certain quantities available. We assume that there was a certain production function, that is, certain technical coefficients. All these were assumptions. Now, there are two aspects of sensitivity analysis that we look at. One, if the assumptions don't hold, that is, if there are changes in our assumptions, what happens to the optimal solution? That's the central question. If some of our assumptions change, does my optimal solution remain optimal, or should I look at other alternatives? In other words, from before, so for example, a typical example would be in the case of profit contributions. Of course, as we know, prices keep on varying day to day. Not only prices of our product, but prices of our inputs, factor costs. So since everything fluctuates, and since these decisions usually have to be taken much in advance, the whole point is we may have assumed a certain profitability level, whereas finally when goods go to market, profits are quite different. If that's the case, we want to see how to adjust our production volumes or market volumes, whatever, in order to somehow still optimize our profit. Okay? So we're going to see that. That is one of the important things. Okay? So changes in the parameters of linear programming problems. That is what sensitivity analysis is about. Well, one, is our solution still optimal? That's one central question that we are asking. And our second question is, how does our profit change? How does our objective function change? And how do each of the constraints contribute? Which constraint contributes more? Which constraint contributes less? In a sense, all of these questions are answered by sensitivity analysis. Okay? All right. Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh. Okay, so now we're going to, of course, see, we can calculate these things manually. Part of why we learned simplex method is that part of the, well, sensitivity analysis in a sense comes from whatever we've done in simplex method. The simplex tableau itself gives us the sensitivity analysis or parts of it anyway. But luckily, most of our software, that is Excel as well as we've seen Tora, automatically give us many of these sensitivity outputs. So, first of all, information about the objective function. So it will tell us what is the optimal value and what are the coefficient ranges. As we're going to see, the coefficient ranges are the ranges within which our solution remains optimal. That is the range of objective function values within which our solution remains optimal. That's called range of optimality. That's the first thing. In a sense, that's the first thing we're going to look at. Okay, I can use a pointer. Right? Range of optimality. That's the first thing that we're going to look at. Okay? Now, along with that, we're going to also see what are the optimal values of the decision variables. Optimal values, and if the value is 0, we have something called a reduced cost. Nothing but the opportunity cost of producing, or rather, producing that product. If we produce a certain product that has an opportunity cost, we actually lose a certain amount of profits. Okay, we'll see what that happens. And finally, information about the constraints. Okay, so are the constraints binding? What is the amount of slack or surplus available? And if the constraints are binding, what are their dual prices, or what are called shadow prices? As we'll see, that is linked with what is called the unit worth. Okay, the unit worth of our resources. So which resources are contributing to what extent at, of course, the margin. And of course, along with that, we have RHS ranges or ranges of feasibility. Just like we had ranges of optimality for objective function coefficients, we'll have ranges of feasibility for RHS bounds. Now, as you'll see, we're only going to look at these two types of changes, all right? So the two types of changes we'll focus on are changes in objective function coefficients, that gives us this coefficient range, right? And changes in RHS bounds or right-hand side ranges, as we say. Okay, these are the two basic changes we'll look at. Now, it's possible, of course, to look at more complex things, right? You can, there's a whole area called parametric analysis, which looks at parametric changes. So if we change a whole, well, in a sort of functional format, there's a sort of functional format between different variables or different parameters. And so if there are functional relationships between different parameters within the model, how that influences or how that affects the final optimal solution, we look at through what is called parametric analysis. But anyway, that's beyond our scope. If we learn sensitivity analysis, that's pretty good enough for us. All right, now, of course, it was chapter 2. In the earlier chapter, we discussed about the elements of linear programming, right? So we talked about objective function values and the optimal, especially the optimal objective function values, decision variable values and their optimal values. Now, we had, okay, I don't think we talked about reduced cost. We'll come to that. And slack and surplus. That is, how much slack means how much less than the right-hand side is the left-hand side, and surplus means how much more than the right-hand side bound is the left-hand side, okay? So those are various things we had studied. And now we're going to look at changes in objective function coefficients and changes in RHS bounds, okay? So sensitivity analysis is used to determine how the optimal solution is affected by changes within specified ranges in two things, objective function coefficients and right-hand side values. So, sensitivity analysis is important to the manager who must operate in a dynamic environment with imprecise estimates of coefficients, right? So, whatever we do, we're going to, whatever coefficients we've, whatever coefficients we've assumed are not precise. Usually, they're the outputs of some type of predictive analytics. And as you know, there's always a certain amount of standard error in predictive analytics. There's something that we cannot avoid, right? And so, because of which, there could be fluctuations in, especially, for example, coefficient, objective function coefficients, and that may lead to inefficiency in our solution, right? So we're going to see how to use this in order to make decisions about our optimal solution. And sensitivity analysis allows the decision maker to ask certain what if questions about the problem. So if there are certain changes, we can ask what if certain things happen, and then get to, well, and get to some outcome from that. Okay. Okay. So just 1 second. I think Hussein is plugging in the whiteboard. Not whiteboard. What's it called? What's this called? इसको क्या बोलते हैं? Whiteboard. Whiteboard. Okay, just 1 second. Remote control. Okay, I'll just charge this in the meantime. Okay. Whiteboard, just 1 second. There's nothing suffering. I said he's setting it up. Please don't make so much problem. Huh? Yeah, relax. Huh? Hello? Huh? Yeah. Perfect. Huh? So, now we're back, and let me just see that the whiteboard is working properly. Okay. Yeah, looks fine. All right. Okay, good. Okay. Okay. Okay, so where were we? Yeah. So we were about to look at the problem when we were disturbed. Okay, so let's continue with this. Okay. All right, so as we were saying, so we were going to look at how to do sensitivity analysis, and the two basic forms of changes are changes in objective function coefficients and changes in RHS bound. Now, let's start with a very simple problem. Okay, so maximize 5x1 plus 7x2 subject to x1 less than or equal to 6, 2x1 plus 3x2 less than or equal to 19, x1 plus x2 less than or equal to 8. Okay, very simple problem to solve. And first, we're going to look at how to solve this, or how to get sensitivity analysis graphically. Okay, so here's the graphical solution. This is, of course, our first constraint, x1 less than or equal to 6. Second constraint was this one, 2x1 plus 3x2 less than or equal to 19. How much does that give? 19 by 2, which is 9.5. Okay, 9.5 here. And 19 by 3, which is 6 point something here. 6.33 here. Okay, so this. And the next one is x1 plus x2 less than or equal to 8. So 8 here and 8 here. So this is our feasible region. And the optimum point, okay, after all this, turns out to be 5, 3. This point here, optimum point is 5, 3. Okay, so as we take the isoprofit line out, it will be tangent to this point. So this is our optimum point. All right, everyone has understood? This is really very simple. Okay. Now, okay, so let's consider how changes in the optimal objective function coefficients may affect the optimal solution. Okay, so let's go back to this. So what we're saying is we're going to now look at changes in pointer option. Okay, changes in our objective function coefficients. There's 5 and 7. Now, first thing to notice is, right, when we drew this picture here, okay, now this picture is a picture of our constraints, correct? The feasible region is defined by the constraints. And now we're making changes in objective function coefficients. And so the first question is this: if we make any changes in objective function coefficients, does that affect feasibility? And the answer, of course, is no, because the feasible region is defined by the constraints. We're changing objective function coefficients, and so therefore, changes in objective function coefficients do not affect feasibility. They may affect optimality, but they do not affect feasibility. This is the first thing to understand from this situation. Okay? Now, because of which, we're now concerned about whether our solution remains optimal if we change the objective function coefficient. And the range of optimality, good afternoon. The range of optimality for each coefficient provides the range of values over which the current solution remains optimal. Okay? So, managers should focus on these objective function coefficients that have narrow range of optimality and coefficients near the endpoints of the range. All right? So, in other words, where the range of optimality is very narrow, that means it's very sensitive. Right? Very sensitive. So, even a slight change in the objective function coefficient can totally change the optimal solution. Okay? So, that is the first thing. Right? Now, how does that work? Well, basically, if you think about it, see, the objective function, so here 5x1 plus 7x2, defines the slope of our isoprofit line. And so where it becomes tangent here, so oh God, that's very bad attempt at a tangent, okay. I won't try that again. All right. So where it becomes tangent, I think they'll show it. Yes. Where this isoprofit line becomes tangent, of course, that is our optimal solution. Correct? Optimal point. Okay. Now the thing is this. Okay. So graphically, the limits of the range of optimality are found by changing the slope of the objective function coefficient line within the limits of the slopes of the binding constraint line. Okay, so here we have something like this. Okay, so now basically, the moment the slope comes outside, so if we look at this constraint here, right, this constraint boundary and this constraint boundary, the isoprofit line slope must be between these two slopes. The moment it comes outside that, it becomes different. So the slope of the isoprofit line is minus C1 by C2. And the slope of the boundary of the constraints are minus A1 by A2, where the constraints are written as A1x1, A2x2 equals B. Right? So now it must be between, so it should lie between the constraints here. So for example, in this case, the two binding constraints are this one, 8, 8, 1. So this is the x1 plus x2 less than or equal to 8 constraint, which has slope minus 1. Okay, slope there is minus 1, and the other one is x1 plus 3x2 equals or less equals 19, and the slope there is minus 2 by 3. And so the slope of our isoprofit line, that is minus C1 by C2, must lie between these two slopes, minus 1 and minus 3 by 2. And so what we do is, okay, so for example, here our objective function was 5x1 plus 7x2. Let's change one coefficient at a time. Let's change C1 and fix C2 as 7. If we do that, for the solution to remain optimal, minus C1 divided by C2, which is 7, should lie between minus 1 and minus 2 by 3. And so multiplying by 7 and taking negative, you'll get C1 should be less than or equal to 7 and greater than or equal to 14 by 3. This becomes our coefficient range for C1. Okay. Similarly, right, if we change C2 this time, so C1 remains at 5, C2 now becomes something else, C2, okay? So what is the slope now? Minus 5 by C2. So minus 5 by C2 has to lie between minus 1 and minus 2 by 3. Rearranging, we'll get C2 must be greater than or equal to 5, less than or equal to 15 by 2. This becomes the coefficient range for C2. So what do these mean? Okay, so coefficient range for C1 means, so as long as C1 is between 14 by 3 and 7 and C2 remains fixed at 7, our solution remains optimal. Remember, the optimal solution was 5, 3, right? This solution, 5, 3, remains optimal. Okay, this solution remains optimal as long as C1 is between 14 by 3 and 7 and C2 is fixed at 7. Or if we make changes in C2, as long as C1 remains fixed at 5 and C2 remains between 5 and 15 by 2, 5 and 7.5, the solution remains optimal. Of course, the optimal value may change. Optimal value may change because the coefficients are changing, but the solution remains optimal. That's the nice thing. Okay? Now, when we do this in Excel, okay, let me do this in Excel and show you the type of sensitivity output that we get. Okay? What happened? Keep. Okay, so let's solve the same problem in Excel and let's see. So, what did we have? Okay, glasses will come into play. So we had x1 and x2, these were the variables. Okay, x1, x2 are the variables. And our objective function, I'll just call it objective function fn. Was it 3 and 7? No, 5 and 7. Okay, objective function. And our constraints, constraint 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right, constraint 1 was just x1 less than or equal to 6. This one was x1 plus 3, x2, was it? I've forgotten. 2x1 plus 3, sorry. 2x1 plus 3x2 less than or equal to something, and x1 plus x2 plus. Okay, we'll quickly take some product of this with, this. And we fix these. All right, copy this over here. And luckily, all of them are less than or equal to. First one is less than or equal to 6. Second is less than or equal to 19, I suppose. 19. And third is less than or equal to 8. Okay. All right. And we're going to solve it. Okay. So here we are. So we go to solver. All right. We're going to maximize, of course. Variables are sitting here, and constraints are all less than or equal to constraints. Okay, very simple. Okay, and we'll take simplex and solve. Okay, so we got the same answer. x1 equals 5, x2 equals 3, z equals 46. And here is the output. So here are the optimal objective function values. x1 equals 5, x1 equals 6. Notice both of them have 0 reduced cost. Okay, we will discuss that in a moment, what reduced cost means. But both of these, because, well, when any variable is positive, it automatically will have 0 reduced cost. Only when a certain product is not produced does it have opportunity cost. So reduced cost, as I said, is related to opportunity cost. We will talk about that a little later. Now, the current objective function coefficients are 5 and 7, right? The variance function was 5x plus 7, 5x1 plus 7x2. Now here are the coefficient ranges. Now what they've done is they've expressed it in terms of allowable increase, allowable decrease. So 5 plus 2 becomes the upper bound. 5 plus 2 is 7. And lower bound is 5 minus BI. 5 minus 0.3333. So how much is that? 4.6666. All right. Now let's see how much we got there. How much did we get here? So lower bound was 14 by 3, which is how much? 4.6666. Upper bound is 7. Okay. And same thing here for C2. Lower bound is 7 minus 2, which is 5. Upper bound is 7 plus 0.5, which is 7.5, which is what we got here also, right? 5 to 7.5. So within these ranges, our solution remains optimal. What? No. Yeah, it's very hot today. Yes. We will have to. Anyway. Okay. Yeah. So maybe the people online are at the advantage today, actually. Aram se sit at home and not roam around. Okay. So as we pointed out, the range of optimality comes in the sensitivity output like this. Coefficients, current coefficient levels, and what is the maximum allowable increase, maximum allowable decrease. Okay. So let us consider how a change in right-hand side for a constraint might affect the feasible region. Now, right-hand side regions. Okay, so. All right, now next comes right-hand side, changes in right-hand side. So, earlier, remember we said that, so when we talked about changes in objective function coefficients, we said that because objective function coefficients do not change the constraints, right? Because these do not change the constraints, changing the objective function coefficients does not affect feasibility, only affects optimality. Yes? Now we're going to look at what happens when we change the BIs. Okay? When we change these BIs. Now this time, notice, this time we are changing feasibility. We're changing the feasible region. If these values change, clearly the feasible region will look different. Yes? So we're going to affect feasibility, but let's ask one other question now. Will it affect optimality? Well, the answer is no, because if you remember, optimality we expressed as a slope condition. Yeah? Optimality was expressed as a slope condition, and the slopes are determined by the left-hand sides here and the objective function coefficient. So changing these do not change the objective function coefficients and left-hand side, and therefore changing RHS bounds does not affect optimality but affects feasibility. Okay, so a very nice sort of dual type thing happens. If we change the CJs, we're affecting optimality but not feasibility. If we change the BIs, we're affecting feasibility but not optimality. Okay, so that's where the big duality really is. Okay, so next comes, so what happens when these changes? All right, so let us consider how a change in RHS of a constraint may affect the feasible region and perhaps change in the optimal solution. So what happens? Well, basically, for example, suppose I increase one of these constraints, okay? So suppose I increase maybe this one. Huh? All right, maybe I'll increase this one. So I increase this by 1. What happens now? Well, the line shifts now, right? So our constraint, so which line was it? This one, okay? Now this line will shift. It will be parallel to that line, but it will have shifted. So what will happen? The optimal solution will be now a new point. Okay, are there any shapes we can define in this? No, not possible. All right, roughly speaking, let's see if I can do this. Oh God, I can't. All right, roughly speaking, okay. Oh God, it looks horrible. Okay, sorry, I won't try that. Anyway, it'll show somewhere. Okay. All right, roughly speaking, it'll be a line parallel to this line, but now going through 6 point something, right? 6.6 on this side and 10 on this side. 10 to 6.6, it will join. And so now there will be a new intersection point somewhere here, which we know will be optimal because of the slope condition. That point has to be optimal. But now, because the RHS bound has changed, the values will change and the optimal value will also change. Okay? But one nice thing we can say, right? Okay. Now, each constraint has something called a dual value. So, when we increase the right-hand side by 1, okay, when we increase the right-hand side by 1, like what we did here, when we increase this by 1, the objective function, optimal objective function, increases by something known as the dual value. Okay? So, the improvement in the value of the optimal solution per unit increase in right-hand side is called the dual value or dual price. So, if we change the right-hand side by 1, what happens is the solution will change slightly and the objective function will change. That change is called the dual price. How much the optimal objective function value changes by is the dual price. Now, can we keep on doing this forever? The answer, of course, is no, because as we keep on doing this, so if we keep on increasing the value there, increasing 19 to 20, 21, 22, what happens, it'll just go outside and become redundant after a while. So within only a certain range is this. You said it doesn't change optimal. Yes, yes. So the point remains optimal. This point here, defined by the intersection of those two lines, remains optimal. But the value changes. The optimal solution value will change, but the point that the intersection point will remain optimal. That is defined by the optimality condition, this condition of slopes. But the values will change. That's the thing here. Okay? And as we keep on doing this, this optimal solution will keep on moving. So as we take different lines parallel to this, the optimal solution will keep on moving along this line until it reaches here. And after that, it will stop. Whatever we increase beyond that, the solution will stop here. That solution will be optimal. And any change after that will have no effect on the optimal solution. Okay? So only within a range is it optimal. And that's called the range of feasibility. Okay? Feasibility range. Where is it? Here. Okay, so the range of feasibility, or the RHS range, is the range over which the dual price is fixed. The dual price is constant in this range. Outside this range, it may change. So as the RHS increases, other constraints will become binding and limit the change in the value of the objective function. So beyond the feasibility range, something else, so the dual value will change. Anyway, as we do some problems, we'll see how that happens. Okay. So graphically, a dual price is determined by adding 1 to the right-hand side of value in question and then resolving the optimal solution in terms of the same binding constraints. Okay, as I was saying here, right? So I've increased this by 1. I've increased this by 1. And so I'll get a new, oh, no, it won't work, sorry. I'll get a new, so this constraint will be, pushed up, and now the new optimal solution will be the new constraint intersected with this constraint. That will be the new optimal point. We'll have to find that new point and find the optimal value at that point. The difference, the change from 46 to that new value is our dual value. Okay, shall we do that? Shall we calculate it quickly? Anyone has a, oh no. Okay, I'll just quickly calculate it in Excel and show you. It'll be the intersection of these 2 points, right? It'll be the intersection of these 2 lines. So one line was, okay, x1 plus x2 equals 8. The other line was 2x plus 2x1 plus 3x2 equals 19, that will become 20. All right? How do we solve it? Well, we can multiply this by 3. So if we multiply this by 3, we'll get 27. And so we'll get 3x1 plus 3x2 equals 27. So when we subtract this, we'll get x1 equals 7. x1 equals 7. x1 equals 7, huh? No. Is that right then? Yeah. 27 minus. Then which intersection point is it? Intersection point x1 plus x2 equals that, and 2x1 plus 19. Yeah, 19. Yeah. So now that becomes 20, no? Intersection point is different, no? Okay. So just 3, 3 and 27. 3, 3 and 3 29s are 27. And when we subtract this, we'll get x1 equals 7, x2 equals 1. Right? 7 and 1 is what I'm getting, right? Oh, 8. Okay, sorry. X1 is 8. So here will be 24, right? Okay, sorry. And this will be 19. So now what will it become? 4, 4. 4, 4, right? So now the solution is 4, 4. And when we put 4, 4 here, 4 into 5 is 20, 4 into 7 is 28. It will become 48. So what is the dual value? 2. Yes? No? All right. So, see, basically, what we need to do is go back to this. So here, we had x1 plus x2 equals 8. 2x1 plus 3x2 equals 19 was the earlier problem. And the solution there was x1 equals 5, x2 equals 3. Now we'll have 2x1 plus 3x2 equals 20, x1 plus x2 equals 8. If we multiply the second equation by 3, we'll get 3x1, 3x2 and 24. And subtract, we'll get x1 equals 4, x2 also equals 4. Right? And so now put that intersection point here. 5 times 4 plus 7 times 4 is 20 plus 28, which is 48. Earlier solution was 46. Now by changing that, we've increased the optimal objective function value by 2. Okay? So the dual value is 2. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, what is this? Dual values 2. So for constraint 1, now first constraint is not binding at all. Okay, so all right, in our optimal solution, notice first constraint is here, so it's not a binding constraint, and therefore its dual value is 0. So an important thing is a dual value for any non-binding constraint has to be 0. So first constraint, dual value is 0. For second constraint, we change the right hand side to 20, we resolve, so we get x1 equals 4, x2 equals 4, and so the dual value is 2. And for the third constraint, we now change it to 9. Change this to 9. What is binding? Okay, binding basically means, see, right? All right. See, binding means left-hand side equals right-hand side at our optimal point. So, at the optimal point, if we evaluate all the constraint left-hand sides and compare them to the right-hand sides, because this is at the intersection, x1 plus x2 will be equal to 8 here, 2x1 plus 3x2 will be equal to 19 here. So, these two are binding constraints, and here x1 is less than 6. It's not equal to 6, and therefore this is not binding. So constraints where left-hand side is not equal to right-hand side are non-binding. Constraints where left-hand side equals right-hand side at the optimal solution are binding. Okay? All right, and finally, the dual value there for the second constraint is how much? Let's see. Okay, for the third constraint, that is. So now we'll increase it to 9. So we'll get 2x1 plus 3x2 equals 19, x1 plus x2 equals 9. So again, 27 minus, so 9 into that is 27. 27 minus 19 is 8, and 8 comma 1, 8 comma 1, because x1 plus x2 equals 9. So 8 comma 1, and now the objective value is 4 times 8 is 32. 4 times 1 is 4. 32 plus, no, 7 times 1 is 7. 32 plus 7 is, how can that be? No, 5 times 8. 5 times 8 is 40. 7 times 1 is 7. 47. 47 minus 46 is 1. And if you look, which one? That's the objective function, nah? 5x1 plus 7x2, right? Okay, and let's compare from the Excel solution. In the Excel solution, what are the dual values? They're also called shadow prices. For the first constraint, dual value is 0, which is what we argued. For the second constraint, dual value is 2, which is what we also found. And for the third constraint, dual value is 3. So, same thing as we got here, right? So, constraints, the dual values are found here. And we can see which ones are binding and non-binding by looking at left-hand side, right-hand side. So here, left-hand side is not equal to right-hand side, so non-binding. Here, left-hand side and right-hand side are equal, so both of these are binding. Okay? Oh, sorry. Okay. Now, okay, I think we skipped 1 or 2 things here, so let's look at them carefully. All right, graphically, the dual price is determined by adding 1 to the right-hand side value in question, and then resolving the optimal solution in terms of the same 2 binding constraints. So notice, the binding constraints remain binding. Only thing is, the value will change, right? Because of the optimality condition. Optimality is retained, feasibility may change. Okay, the dual price is equal to the difference between the values of the objective functions between the new and original problems. Okay, so just as we did. The dual price for a non-binding constraint is always 0. And a negative dual price indicates that the objective function will not improve if the RHS is increased. In fact, by decreasing the RHS, we can improve the objective function value. Okay. All right, now, before we go further, we need to talk about 2 types of costs here. Okay. Something called a relevant cost and a sunk cost. This often plays an important role in determining how to interpret the dual value. So a resource cost is a relevant cost if the amount paid for it is dependent upon the amount of resource used by the decision variables. Okay? So if the amount paid for it is dependent on the amount of resource used by the decision variables. Okay? So in other words, the relevant costs are reflected in the objective function coefficients. In other words, it's been already removed. Where we're talking about a profit contribution, it has already been removed. On the other hand, a sunk cost, resource cost is a sunk cost if it must be paid regardless of the amount of resource actually used by the decision variable. So it's like a fixed cost thing. So once we incur the cost, irrespective of how much we use, that sunk cost remains. So they are not reflected in objective function coefficients. Often you'll see that. Sometimes we don't remove that particular cost just to see what will happen if we are able to increase that by a certain amount. Okay. So sometimes we need this to be a sunk cost. Sometimes we take it as a relevant cost. Yeah, so see, where you're taking profit contributions, if you've removed all resource costs from that, those are now relevant costs. On the other hand, if you don't remove them and subtract, for example, that in the So, for example, if you have to buy a certain resource in bulk, irrespective of how much you use of that, you're buying. Suppose you're buying 100 kgs of the resource. So it's not how much you use of it that is relevant, but how much you bought the entire thing anyway. So that becomes a sunk cost. If on the other hand, we're sort of using a certain amount only, and that is subtracted from the objective function coefficient, then that's a relevant cost. Okay, only how much we use of it is relevant, not the total part. Okay, that's the. Oh, huh.
So if I say the resource cost, I had so much cost, I for many people over a period of time.
Oh, okay. Call that a sunk cost, huh? That's yeah, no, not only that, but for example, if you're looking at it project-wise, for example, the bill amount for those are relevant costs there, right? So billing hours or whatever for each the employee in the project becomes a relevant cost. But yeah, for example, I think something like people overall project cost or no, for example, overall hires could be something like a sunk cost because that may not be relevant in that particular project itself. Maybe, but then see in different contexts it's different. So, for example, from an organizational point of view, that may be relevant cost. But from a project point of view, if you're optimizing one project, that may not be relevant. Okay, so that could be in that sense. Okay. All right. So let's. Okay. So. Huh. Hmm.
We used to arrive at their pricing formula for gas or for example, now we have
yeah, of course. Yeah. Naturally, it has to. So, see, again, it depends on how the business operates. So, if things are bought in bulk without, then of course those become sunk costs. On the other hand, if it's bought in contract form, then it can be made as a relevant cost. So, it all depends on what are the business arrangements done for that. So, and based on that, you can then perhaps include that and look at what are the pricing, as you said. Huh. Huh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so for example, yes. So, but then see, there are lots of, so, yeah, but let me point out that that won't directly go into this. Of course, they may want to try and optimize that with some type of revenue management type thing. So, for example, offering certain discounts for some certain things like that. So, something called revenue management. But usually, what we do in this is just have a fixed type of price. Maybe if you're considering a more dynamic scenario, then perhaps you can bring that type of thing in. Yeah. But yeah, actually, one could do that perhaps. One could say that, okay, what are the different possible levels that optimize this? So that can also be taken partly as a variable also, in a sense, yeah. Okay, and one could look at that. But then, of course, demand also depends on that. So it's, of course, in practice, it's far more complicated. Huh. Yeah. Of course, what we're only going to look at are idealistic scenarios. See, even when, and that's perhaps why all this is so difficult, because the type of assumptions that you make become so unrealistic finally that businesses just say that, okay, it's just very unrealistic finally. Of course, things like in areas like supply chain is very, very successful. Supply chain, a couple of areas, prescriptive analytics is very successful. But in, for example, if you're looking at sales teams, how many visits should they make? How long should they spend? All these are very variable, very random. It's very difficult to predict something like this. One could, yeah, and so therefore it's very difficult to say that, okay, the return on investment will be this. Very difficult to actually optimize that then. One can try something, but it becomes difficult. That's where the difficulty is. So, and another thing that we've seen in this is that if marketing gets some benefit, immediately that becomes implemented. Whereas in marketing, this has not been as effective, for example, as things like predictive analytics. Predictive analytics has been far more, as you must know now, all those advertising and customer analytics, all those are much more successful in marketing. Whereas prescriptive analytics has not been so successful. That's perhaps why it hasn't picked up that much. Yeah. Back-end HR operations, there it's been quite successful. Whereas in marketing, it's not been, because there are far more variable, far more random aspects in marketing than in these actually. No? Mm-hmm. That should be, of course. If you did the calculations, so the interesting thing, of course, you'd have to make some type of assumptions, and based on that, based on some calculations, I'm sure you can do it. But then, see, IPL, that would be a different type of scenario, because what you're doing is you're playing against other players, other people who are bidding. That becomes a game scenario. That's even more complex scenario. Here you're just sort of optimizing, assuming that everything will come in place. But there, not only should you bid, others shouldn't bid that much. That type of thing. Huh? So it becomes again, yeah. So all these come into that. But yeah, perhaps you can try this type of thing, if possible. Of course, I'm say in your projects, you'll be doing projects soon. If possible, try to bring some prescriptive analytics into it, if possible. But let me tell you in advance, it is difficult. It is generally difficult. But if possible, if you can bring it in, it would be useful. The more people try to bring in prescriptive analytics, the more popular it will become. And the problem is this: the marketing aspect has not come out very well. The moment marketers get hold of it, I think they'll they'll automatically popularize it. So we don't need to do anything after that. But until then, unfortunately, it's not as popular, for example, as predictive. Predictive analytics has been very, very successful in many marketing applications. Anyway, so yes, an important thing. So when we look at dual prices, we have to be careful. One, if the resource is a sunk cost versus if it's a relevant cost. So if the resource is a sunk cost, the dual price is the maximum amount you should be willing to pay for one additional unit of the resource. That means you've already spent money on the existing resource. Any additional amount of resource, this becomes what is called the shadow price, the maximum we should be willing to pay for an additional unit of that resource. Okay? On the other hand, if the resource cost is relevant, the dual price is the maximum premium over the normal cost that you should be willing to pay for one unit of the resource. So normal cost is already taken care of in the objective function. So anything more than that is what is being compared with the dual value. So premium, in other words, how much more than the normal cost will we be willing to pay for the resource? Okay, very small sort of thing. Okay. So let's get to the, so we've already done this particular example. So let's look at some other example. Okay. That's where it comes here. And oh, yes, we didn't talk about range of feasibility. Now, the range of feasibility is the range of values of the RHS bounds within which the dual values remain constant. Okay. So range of feasibility is determined by finding the values of a right-hand side coefficient such that the same two lines that determine the original optimal solution continue to determine the optimal solution for the problem. So, okay, so as I was saying, so for example, okay. Now, as I was saying here, right, as we increase on this side, the optimal solution is determined by the intersection of this line with this line. So we can increase all the way up to here. On the other hand, when we come down, it will be determined by, Oh, sorry. What happened? Okay. As we come down, huh? How do we? Where did? Oh, I see. We're not in full. Oh, we're not in this mode. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So now, as we come down, the optimal solution comes down like this until it reaches here. Beyond which, if we come down further, what will happen? It will be the intersection of these two lines. This line with that line, right? And so the optimality will change. And so between this point and this point will be the RHS range for this constraint. So whatever the value at this point is versus whatever the value at this point is the optimality range for this. Similarly with this, until we move it, until it comes here, then it will take over and continue. And so that will be the optimality range for this. And similarly with this, as we change this, we'll get different values there. Okay, so now how do we get the optimality range here? So let's see. Okay, so for the right-hand side, for the first constraint, allowable increases anything, so it can shift to the right any amount without any change. But from the left-hand side, it can go all the way up to 6 minus 1, which is 5. Once it reaches 5, if it goes any further down, the dual values will change. Okay. Similarly here, from 19 plus 5 is 24. 19 minus 1 is 18. So as long as this is between 18 and 24, the dual value will continue to be 2. In this case, 8 minus 1.66 is 6.33, and 8 plus 0.833 is 8.33. So between 6.333 and 8.333, the dual value for this constraint remains at 1. Okay? All right. Okay, so let's try a different problem and let's see how that works. Okay, so Olympic Bike is introducing 2 new lightweight bicycle frames, deluxe and professional, to be made from special aluminum and steel cords. The anticipated unit profits are $10 for deluxe, 15 for professional. The number of pounds of each alloy per frame is summarized as below. Deluxe 2 pounds of aluminum, 3 pounds of steel. Professional, 4 pounds of aluminum, 2 pounds of steel. A supplier delivers 100 pounds of the aluminum alloy and 80 pounds of steel alloy weekly. So how many deluxe and professional frames should one produce each week? So what are we trying to do? We're trying to determine how many deluxe, how many professional frames. Let's call that X1 and X2. We're trying to maximize the total profit, which is 10x1 plus 15x2, subject to, well, it's actually resources are columns here, 2x1 plus 4x2 less than or equal to 100, 3x1 plus 2x2 less than or equal to 80. Okay, so, all right, so they're very simple. All right, so 10x1, maximize 10x1 plus 15x2, 2x1 plus 4x2 less than or equal to 100, 3x1 plus 2x2 less than or equal to 80. Okay, and I think we're directly doing it in Excel. So we'll just, shall we go there and do it directly in Excel? No, not doing that. Oh. Okay. Oh, what happened? Yeah, this one. Okay. All right, ready? Okay, so what I think I'll do is I'll just modify this. We don't need, I think we'll just remove one of these constraints. That should do. All right, profit contribution. Okay, what are the profit contributions? 10 and 15, right? And here we had 4 and 2. And here we had 3 and 2. 2 and 4, okay. 2 and 4, 3 and 2. Huh? Okay. And we can remove all this. And we can change this to, let's call this aluminum. Okay. Aluminum alloy and steel alloy. Huh? Okay, steel. Let's write as steel. Steel is an alloy anyway, whatever. And this is what frame, and this is deluxe and professional. Huh? Deluxe frames and professional frames, right? Okay. Sorry. And it's actually all ready as well. So everything is ready. We just have to press solve. Okay. So let's solve it. And so what happens? We just can produce 4 professional frames. Oh, I forgot to change this. I'm sorry. That's why. How much? 180, yeah? 180, yes. Okay. That's why it came to 4 and, all right. I'm sorry. That was a silly mistake. All right. So now we're ready. Now we're really ready. Okay. So solve. And what do we get? Oh, anyhow, all right. This is wrong. Okay. So what do we have? So we produce 15 deluxe frames and 125 professional frames, and our total profit contribution is 4,125. Okay. Now let's go to our sensitivity report. So the optimal values are here. Okay. So 15 deluxe frames and 17.5, not 175, 17.5 professional frames is what we're getting. Now notice, since both are positive, both have 0 reduced cost. Okay. So if you remember, reduced cost only happens when we don't produce something. Okay. As we'll see, I'll show you when that happens. Okay. Now here, so in other words, actually both are profitable. If something wasn't profitable, then it'll end up 0, as we'll see in a moment. Okay, now what are the coefficient ranges? For C1, for deluxe frames, it can go down to 7.5 up to 22.5. So as long as profitability of deluxe frames is between 7.5 and 22.5, without changing profitability of professional frames, this solution remains optimal. Similarly, as long as professional frames are within 15 minus 8.3 is how much? 6.666 and 20. So as long as profit contributions of professional frames is between 6.6666 and 20, and as long as deluxe frames again do not change in profitability, again this solution remains optimal. Okay. Now, when we are using up all the alloy, both left-hand sides and right-hand sides of both constraints are equal, and so both are binding constraints. That means we're using up all the aluminum quantity of aluminum alloy as well as steel alloy in our production. We're completely using them. And if we had more amount of aluminum alloy, then our profit contribution can increase by 3.125. And if we have 1 more pound of steel alloy, our profit contribution can increase by 1.25. Both of these are, No, so per unit. So 1 more, an additional pound of aluminum alloy will increase the profit by 3.125, absolute units, not percentage, absolute units. Okay? All right? Okay. Similarly, 1 more pound of steel, if we were able to get 1 more pound of steel, we can increase our profit by 1.25. Okay. Notice here both are relevant costs, right? Oh, we don't know that actually. We don't know the condition actually. But anyhow, we can assume them to be relevant costs here. I think anyway, we'll see. Let's see what they say. Okay, so these are the number of frames of each. Okay, we've already solved it. Okay, so 15 and 17.5. And okay, so output. So number of deluxe frames is 15, number of professional frames is 17.5, objective function value is 412.5. Okay. All right, now suppose the profit on deluxe frames is increased to 20. Is the above solution still optimal? Okay, so how do I answer that? Well, I go to, okay, so what this is asking is this still within the optimal coefficient or coefficient range? So this is between 7.5 and 22.5. So is 20 within that range? Yes. Right? Okay. The range here is 10 minus 2.5, that's 7.5. 10 plus 12.5, which is 22.5. So because that's within the range, the solution will still remain optimal. What is the value of the objective function when the unit profit is increased to 20? Well, it's very simple. So now it becomes 20 into 15 plus 15 into 17.5. Okay, we can just go here and change it, right? Change this to 20 and we'll get 562.5. Okay, this becomes that. And just to see whether this really doesn't change, shadow price is the same as dual price. Okay. Well, okay, there are slight differences, but we'll talk about that when we come across a problem with that. Okay. So what we said as dual price is the same as shadow price. Only thing is slight difference when there is minimization. So we'll talk about that later. Okay. All right. So now to see whether the optimal solution changes or not, let's solve this again. Okay. So let's solve. Has the solution changed? No. Okay. Now let me also just quickly show you. So I've changed this now to 20. What will happen? Oh, I see. Yeah, it's the same as dual price. So if the right-hand side increases by 1, how much does the optimal objective function value increase by? Rajesh, it's the same thing as what we talked about in dual price. Yes, in this case, shadow price equals dual price. Okay? It's another nomenclature. Okay, now, what was I saying? Now let's come, oh, I didn't do that, Oh, sorry. Let me do this again. So I'll solve this. So I've changed it. Now let's see the sensitivity analysis of this. So earlier, this was our coefficient range. 10, it was 10, up to 22.5, down to 7.5. Now let's see what happens. Okay, notice it's still the same coefficient range. If you look at it, same coefficient range, okay? So still 22.5 upper, 7.5 lower, but look at what has happened to the shadow prices. Why have they changed? Why have the shadow prices changed? Look at it. See, earlier it was 3.125, now it's down to 0.625. Because when the objective function coefficient changes, automatically shadow price will also change. No, but this is increased. See, that one decreased, this one increased. Okay, so it all depends how much they're consuming of each. Okay, optimality changes. Yes, exactly. Okay, no, optimality has not changed. Feasibility conditions have changed. See, notice the optimality has not changed. The optimal solution remains the same. Right? Optimal ranges also remain the same. Right? The feasibility aspect has changed. Okay, notice the dual values have changed here. It's not the optimality is determined here. Feasibility is determined here. Okay, so changes in optimal things, those things has changed these parts. It hasn't changed the optimality at all. It all depends on how it's consuming it. Right? Because no, but it's less on this side, right? Whereas this one is more on this side. That's why when the value of profitability of deluxe increased, this steel dual value has increased, whereas aluminum one has decreased because of the relative importance of them, okay, or the technical coefficients. Right? Anyway, so that was that. Okay, now let's go to another thing. Okay, so all right, so we said that within this range, the solution will remain optimal. So what will happen if it goes outside the range? So for example, here the upper part is 22.5. What will happen if it becomes, say, 25? So any suggestions? Okay, so the coefficient range here is 10 minus 2.5, so 7.5 to 10 plus 12.5, which is 22.5. Yeah, so if it goes out of the range, what do you think will happen now? No. What will happen is the optimal solution will change. So within the range, the optimal solution remains the same. Outside the range, the optimal solution will change. So any prediction? I'm making this 25 now. Any prediction what will happen now? Some guess. Okay? All right, think of it like this now. Now, which product is more profitable? Deluxe. Deluxe. Steel isn't a product, steel is a resource. Deluxe becomes more profitable. So we want to put as much of our resources into deluxe. And so now all resources will be taken away from professional, put into deluxe. That's what's going to happen. Let's see how that happens. So now when we solve this, we made the change already. Has that changed? Now notice, we're not producing professional. Because deluxe is so much more profitable, we don't produce professional at all. All resources are put into deluxe. And now notice, left-hand side equals right-hand side only for steel. Actually, it's steel that deluxe requires more of, not that aluminum. And so aluminum now becomes non-binding, whereas steel is the binding resource. Steel is what determines everything. So steel will have a dual value, aluminum will not have. Okay, let's see. All right, so notice steel has a dual value, 8.33, whereas aluminum doesn't. And now professional has a, what is called, reduced cost. Why does it have a reduced cost? Because it's not profitable. What the reduced cost tells us is, if we produce professional now, when deluxe is so much more profitable, we'll actually lose out on profit. That's what opportunity cost means. So the opportunity cost of producing professional frames is minus 1.6. That means if I was to produce one professional frame, the resources I will take away from deluxe will cause my profit to be reduced by 1.66. Yeah. Yeah, of course. One of my friends is doing that actually. Yeah. Productivity, yeah. It's marginal productivity, yeah. Of course. Yeah, of course. Market price is too variable to determine all that. But of course, it's one of the important minimum support prices are usually what they take. So anything above that is good, right? If you get a price, anything above minimum support prices. But apart from that, there are many other problems in that as well. So you have to look at how fertilizers and contributing agriculture, irrigation, all these things come into it. But yeah, I think one person's thesis is all about how LPP is used in agriculture. Yeah, I remember one whole thesis is about that, how LPP can be used. And one of my friends is doing that actually. Some other application of that. Okay, anyway, so, but a good question. No, it's not so simple. It's not so simple, but see, as it turns out, for example, it probably depends on crops. It probably depends on what mix of, so how to determine the mix of crops, many things are involved in it. I haven't seen it fully. She was showing me. There was one conference a couple of months ago. I saw that there. But of course, I didn't go in much detail. But I'm sure. So you do. I don't think they've brought ERP much into this, but if they can bring ERP in, but I think these. For example, big retailers must have some type of ERP with that, right? They must have some back-end supply chain, so they must have something like that. But in which case, it's already done there. Future. Okay, demand not based on price. It's okay, true. No, but still, so if they formulate the problem like this, the moment they do this, automatically you can start seeing the unit worth of each of the different aspects. See, the moment you get this, then you can see what contribution irrigation is making, what contribution fertilizer making, and so on. Right? So automatically that comes. Okay, anyway, so yeah, coming back to this problem then. So that's the concept of reduced cost. So when we're looking at production, especially a product mix problem, if a certain product is not profitable enough, it'll have a reduced cost. And that reduced cost is nothing but the opportunity cost of producing that product. If we produce that product, how much profit are we losing? Okay, and yeah, dual value, same sort of things, RHS ranges, all those. And now notice, of course, the coefficient ranges changed totally. Okay, here, this one is the same. No, this one is also changed. Okay, so notice, it's totally changed. So now, the allowable increase is infinity. So it's unbounded, no upper limit. Lower limit is that same 22.5. So again, if we decrease it lower than 22.5, we'll go back to the previous solution. And here, we can increase it up to 1.6. So that means 16.6666. We can decrease it to any extent because it's no longer profitable. So if it becomes a little more profitable, again, we may go back to the previous. Okay, similarly, for example, let's go back to it, I think it was 10. Let's look at the downside. So what was that? That was 7.5. So for example, if you make it 6 now it won't be profitable. Now all the resources will go to professional. Okay? In a similar way, all resources will now go to professional. Okay? And we'll end up producing 25 professional frames. And now the reduced cost for deluxe is minus 1.5. In other words, if we produce deluxe, now we're losing out because it's not at all profitable. Okay? And now notice, it's aluminum that has the shadow price. Okay? It's aluminum. Aluminum was crucial for this professional frames, whereas steel was crucial for that other, the deluxe frame. Okay? Okay, anyway, so enough of this simple type of thing. Let's get to some case studies now. Okay, some applications of these. Okay, let's finish this set of slides. Okay, so this is the coefficient range. Because 20 is within this coefficient range, optimal solution will not change, and the optimal profit will become 20 into 15 plus 15 into 17.5, which is 562.5. Okay, very simple. Now, if the unit profit on deluxe frames were 6 instead of 10, would the optimal solution change? Yes, we just saw that now it becomes very, very, very unprofitable, and so all resources will now go to professional frames. We'll produce 25 professional frames. Yes, and the answer is yes. Lower limit is 7.5, okay, and upper is 22.5. Since 6 is outside the range, optimal solution would change. Okay. Now, so far we were talking about changes in these things. But the 100% rule looks for simultaneous change. So, for example, suppose we had two changes happening together. There's a lot of disturbance. Oh, I think, oh, sorry. Yes. Oh, no, I think that's, oh, okay. Now, is it okay now? I'm sorry, I think the microphone had just moved aside. We got excited, so it moved aside. Okay. All right. Yeah. So when we have simultaneous changes, we need to use the 100% rule. Now, what this means is basically, see, those coefficient ranges were for single changes. That is, changing only the profitability of deluxe model or changing only the profitability of professional model. But suppose both profitabilities change. In that case, we need to use the 100% rule. Of course, if we have the model available, we can directly do it and see. But this is using the sensitivity report, that is, okay? So 100% rule states that simultaneous changes in objective function coefficients will not change the optimal solution as long as the sum of percentages of the change divided by corresponding maximum allowable change in the range of optimality for each coefficient does not exceed 100%. Okay, I know it's a very long explanation, but very simply it means this. Okay, so let's try to see. Okay, so for example, if simultaneously the profit on deluxe frames is raised to 16 and the profit on professional frames raised to 17, will the current solution be optimal? Okay, so all right, so let's go here and see. Okay, so not this one, the previous one. Okay, so this is our sensitivity. No, oh God, that was the, okay, let's do it again. 1 second, sorry. All right, so we had 10 and 15, right? So let's solve the problem again. All right, okay. Now, okay, so if we look at the coefficient range for C1, it's between 7.5 and 22.5. And for C2, it's between 6.666 and 20. Okay. Now, what we've done here is both of them have changed. So first one is increased to 16, second one is increased to 17. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to look at percentage increase in the first as well as percentage increase in the second. So how much is the percentage increase in the first? It's increased by 6. Increased by 6 divided by the allowable increase was 12.5. So the percentage increase is how much? 48%. The percentage increase in the second case is how much? So it's increased from 15 to 17. So it's increased by 2 divided by 5. No, divided by the allowable, maximum allowable increase. The amount of increase divided by the maximum allowable increase. So that's 40%. And so when we add these two together, we'll get 88%, which is less than 100%. And so the solution remains optimal. Okay, so that's what this person is saying here. So if C1 equals 16, amount C1 changed by is 6, and the maximum allowable increase is 12.5. So the percentage change is 6 divided by 12.5, which is 48% change. C2 is now 17, so the amount it is changed by is 2. Maximum allowable increase is 5, so 2 by 5 is 40%. So sum of these percentage changes is 88%, which is less than 100%. So the solution remains optimal. So let's just see. So we can go here So we're going to change this to 16 and this to 17. Okay. Now what do we do? Now we just solve again. Is there been any change? No. But of course, you'll see a change here. What will the change be? The dual values will change. Why? Why will the dual values change? Why will the dual values change? Because the objective function coefficients have changed, obviously. Okay. Right? So very, very simple. Okay, same thing with feasibility and range of feasibility. Okay, so again, the dual value doesn't change as long as the 100% rule remains, the percentage change remains within 100%. So given that aluminum, given that aluminum is a sunk cost, what is the maximum amount the company should be willing to pay for 50 extra pounds of aluminum? Okay, so is that within the RHS range? Yes, it's within the, it's up to 60, right? So up to 60. So what happens? So it's within the thing there. So since the cost for aluminum is sunk cost, the shadow price provides the value of extra aluminum. Okay, the value. So shadow price is the same as the dual price for the maximization problem, as we said. The shadow price for aluminum is 3.125, and the maximum allowable increase is 60. Since 50 is within the range, this remains constant. So the value of 50 additional pounds is 50 into this, which is 156.25. So our optimal solution will increase by 156.25. All right. Now, if it was a relevant cost, what is the maximum amount the company should pay for this? Okay, so if aluminum is a relevant cost, the shadow price would be the amount above the normal price. Okay, the aluminum the company will be willing to pay. So if initially it costs $4 per pound, then we should be willing to pay $7.25 or $125 per pound. Okay, so in this case of sunk cost, how much is the additional? How much the additional we can pay? In this case, it's the premium on the normal price. Okay, so now minimization problem. Okay, this is where shadow prices are different from shadow prices are different from these things. Okay, so let's create another page for this. What I'll do is, since most of the things are similar, I'll just copy this here. Right? This time the mixed constraints. So minimize, this is cost. Okay, cost function. Okay, what are the costs? 6 and 9. Yeah, $6 and $9. All right, and we have 3 constraints this time. So I'll just push this down. No, I could have pulled it down. Anyway, whatever. 1, 2, 10, 7.5, and 1. 1, 2, 10, 7.5, and the 1 here. Okay. Now, what do we have on the right hand side? 8, 30, and 2. 8, 30, and 2. 8, 30, and 2. Okay. And last 2 are greater than or equal to constraints. Okay. Okay. Greater than or equal to constraints. Okay. Now, okay, doesn't matter what these are, I suppose. Okay, let's just call them constraint 1, 2, and 3. So no, constraint 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and let's call them A and B. Let's call it A and B, whatever, doesn't matter. Okay, so Now let's see what this gives us. We're minimizing, minimize subject to these. Okay, so, right, so we're minimizing. These are the variables. First one is less than or equal to 8, and so bad. And second two are greater than or equal to these. Okay. All right. So our solution is 1.5 units of A, 2 units of B. Okay, whatever these constraints were. All right, so here's 1.5. Both are positive, so both have 0 reduced cost. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Now, notice here, the dual price here are negative. Okay, if you look at, this is a different software. Dual prices for second and third constraints are negative, whereas shadow prices here are positive. Same value, but positive. Okay, this is where the difference between shadow price and dual price comes. Oh, what? What happened? This is where the difference between shadow price and 5.5, where? Yeah, so the final values. So left hand side is 5.5, right hand side is 8. These ones. Right? So left hand side. So first one is not binding. Right? Second one and third one are binding constraints. And they are the ones with dual values or shadow prices. Notice the shadow prices are positive here, right? Whereas the dual values are negative. Okay, so what does that mean? So that means if we increase the right hand side by 1, what will happen? The cost will increase by that much. Okay, so shadow price tells us, the cost will, so how much will be, so the cost tells us, so the shadow price tells us how much the objective function will increase by, the dual value tells us how much it will improve by. Okay, that's the basic difference. Okay, so let me show you. So let's increase this to 31. Okay. Now, what is our prediction? It'll increase, how much is it? 0.6, huh? Is that 0.6? I can read it from here, 0.6. So we're expecting this to increase to 27.6. Okay, so I've changed this to 31. When I solve this again, all right, so what has happened? Increase to 27. So shadow price is how much the objective function increases by. Dual value is how much it improves by. It has, see, we're trying to minimize, but it has increased. So it has not improved, it's worsened. That's why it's negative. Whereas the shadow price is shown as how much it's increased by. All right? Is that clear now? In the case of maximization, both things are the same. Improvement and increase are the same. Whereas in minimization, it's slightly different. It's a different convention. I think they're just okay. So similarly, yeah. So for example, supply chain is minimizing the cost only, no? Right? For example, yeah, profit, yeah. So mostly, in fact, so mostly in operations related things, price is something that is usually not in control. No? Price is usually fixed from outside. And so what you're trying to do is minimize cost. Right? So production. Yeah, there are portfolio construction. Yeah. I'm doing that in a different class actually. For finance, SAPM, we're doing that actually. Not today, I think another day. You can talk to them. But it's not LPP that we use. There is an LPP approach also, but we use, so what are the LHS values? So, okay, see, basically, all right, LHS values means, okay, let me solve this again and then I'll tell you what this LHS value means again. Okay, so, see, basically, so the optimal values are 1.5 and 2. If I substitute them in the left-hand side here, 1 into 1.5 plus 2 into 2, that gives how much? That gives 5.5. So I'm using that much of the resource. So the left hand side is how much of the resource is used, right hand side is how much is available, right? So in this case, this is not binding. We're not using up all the resource. Whereas here, these two constraints are binding, right? 10 into 1.5 plus 7.5 into 2 gives us 30 here, which is equal to 30 here. And 2 is equal to 2, which is what we required for this. So these two constraints are binding. The first constraint is not binding. And that reflects in the shadow prices or dual values. The second two constraints have dual values. First one doesn't, because it's not binding. A non-binding constraint does not have a shadow price. Okay. Oh, this is nice. 2 plus 2, 2 minus 2. Is the RHS range here. Okay, all right. So RHS range is very nice here, 2 to 2. Anyway, so let's see what they want with this. Okay, so all this is done. Very nice. Okay, according to so we're interpreting the output. Optimal values are x1 equals 1.5, x2 equals 2. And objective value is 27. Okay. Now, suppose that unit cost of x1 is decreased to 4. Is the current solution optimal? So it was 6, it's decreased to 4. So let's see. Okay, coefficient range 6, it can go down to 0 up to 12. So is it within the range? Yes. And so solution remains optimal. What is the value of the objective function when the unit cost is decreased to 4? Okay, so it's within the range. So now what will it be? 4 into 1.5 plus 9 into 2 will be 24. Okay. How much can the unit cost of x2 be decreased without concern for the optimal solution changing? Unit cost of x2 is, it can be decreased up to 4.5. Okay. Okay. So no limit, up to 4.5. From 9 to 4.5 is, okay, so as long as the objective function coefficient does not fall below 4.5, solution. Now, if simultaneously the cost of x1 is raised to 7.5 and the cost of x2 is reduced to 6, will the current solution remain optimal? Okay, so let's see about that. So, x1 is raised to 7.5. So how much is the increase? From 6 to 7.5, the increase is 1.5. And we have to divide by the allowable increase, which is 6. Okay, so that's 25% there. But the other one is a decrease. Oh, sorry. The other one is a decrease. So it's decreased to that. So what is the decrease? Decreased is from 9 to 6 is a decrease of 3, right? Okay. Just look at the absolute value of that. No, I have to divide by the maximum allowable decrease. Okay, because it's the decrease, I look in the decrease value. If it increase, I'll divide by the. Okay, so that's 66%. And so total this is 88, 91 point, whatever. And so, is this within less than 100%? Yes. And so, what is our conclusion? Solution remains optimal. Solution remains 91.7%. And so, we can even try that out. So, when we go here and change this to 7.5 and this to how much? 6, huh? 6. Okay, will the solution remain optimal? Yes. Okay. Of course, all dual value, everything will change now, but okay. All right. Okay, if the right-hand side constraint of 3 is increased by 1, what is the effect on the optimal solution? Okay, so right-hand side of constraint 3. Okay, constraint 3, okay, we can go back to the, anyway, I've done that. So if it's increased by 1, optimal objective function value increases by 4.5. Okay, the cost increases by 4.5. Right? By the way, this is also often called the marginal cost. When you want to calculate marginal cost or anything, this is how it's done. Make a cost function, and this is our marginal cost. How much does the cost increase by with unit increase in whatever product or whatever? Okay, marginal cost. And so quite often it's used in finance domain itself to find the marginal cost. They develop a linear programming problem to find the marginal cost. Very nice. Application within. Huh. Huh. Hmm. Huh. Hmm. Huh. This they must be using some type of regression, most probably. I doubt whether they'll be doing this type of thing. When they're doing something like that, they'll have some variables they'll plug in and get what is the expected change. Most probably they'll be doing. This is most probably a predictive analytic problem. Most probably, because rarely would you actually try to optimize just to find out what is the change. Rarely you'll be doing that. The whole point of this is to try and optimize. Using that to try and look at is very. So it's more likely that they have some type of model. They're just predictive model that they're just plugging this into, and usually it will be some regression based thing. Usually, yeah. They'll take some indicators, plug them in, and yeah, most probably I think. Anyway, so let's finish this. It's a very long thing, no? 53 sides. So if the right-hand side is increased by 1, what is the effect on the optimal solution? Well, it increases by $4.50. The objective function value increases by $4.50. So the cost increases by $4. Last slide. Okay, so that's taken us to the entire thing. Okay, let's just do one thing, right? Since we should do something substantial. What is that? Actually, okay, so let's do one more problem based on sensitivity analysis. Okay, and then we can get to our case studies next time then. Okay, we can't actually do a case study because it'll take too long. Okay, so this is the chapter that we just completed now. Okay, so sensitivity analysis and interpretation of solution. Okay, so let's go to the problems here. Oh, this is that. I was talking, before you people came, I was talking about parametric analysis. This is an example of parametric analysis. Okay, so anyway, where are we? These are still, yes, now the problem starts. So let's look for a nice problem. Okay, graphical this is. Okay. All right, let's do this. No, it's not. Okay, yeah, we were talking about application in, okay, we were talking about application in investment. So let's do one. Okay, so I'm looking at question number 7 here. Okay, Investment Advisors is a brokerage firm that manages stock portfolios for a number of clients. Okay, a particular portfolio consists of U shares of US Oil and H shares of Huber Steel. There are two companies. Okay? Annual return for US Oil is $3 per share. Annual return for Huber Steel is $5 per share. US Oil shares sells for $25 per share. Huber Oil sells for Huber Steel, sells for $50 per share. The portfolio has $80,000 to be invested. Portfolio risk index is 0.5 per share of US oil, 0.25 per share of Huber Steel, has a maximum of 700. In addition, portfolio is limited to a maximum of 1,000 shares of US oil. The linear programming formulation is as follows. We're maximizing total return. So maximize 3u plus 5h, which is the return. And the constraints are first the funds. So 25u plus 50h, those are the prices, less than or equal to 80,000, that's the funds available. For risk, 0.5u plus 0.25h, those are the risk indices, less than or equal to 700. And last constraint is maximum of 1,000 shares of US oil. So U less than or equal to 1,000. And of course, U and H are non-negative. Okay, and they've kindly solved the problem for us in figure 13D. Oh, yeah, it's a misprint. Clearly a misprint. Yeah, it should be H. Obviously, it should be H. Okay, so now let's look at our optimal solution, which is in this figure here. Okay, so sorry. So what is our optimal solution? U equals 800, H equals 1,200, right? So this tells us that the optimal number of shares of US oil is 800. Optimal number of shares of Huber Steel is 1,200, and our return, optimal return is $8,400. Okay, so optimal solutions come here, and optimal value of the objective function is this, the optimal return. And notice both of them have zero reduced cost. We're using both investments, right? Sometimes if one did not give good enough return, we'll put all our money in the other one, for example. Okay, now, which of the constraints are binding? Well, we look at the slack and surplus. Here, for constraints 1 and 2, slack and surplus are both 0. And so, constraints 1 and 2 are binding. Third constraint, slack is 200. Third constraint was that maximum 1,000. We're not investing maximum of that. We're only investing 800. Huh? So, this one is not binding. Okay? And here are the dual values. So, for the first constraint, which is funds, the funds available, the dual value is 0.09333. So that is the marginal rate of return. If I invest $1 more, the return I'm getting on that extra dollar is 9.333%. Yeah, very nice, huh? Marginal rate of return. Now this one tells me my trade-off between risk and return. So if I allowed 1 more unit of risk, huh? Yeah, we can. Okay, fine. You want to solve it. All right. All right. So, yeah, of course. All right. So, US oil and Huber Steel. Okay. US oil and Huber Steel. These are the variables. Oh, sorry. Okay, and our total return is 3 and 5. Then our investment is 25 and 50 here, I think. Our risk index is 0.25 and 0.5. And then this is just a 1. No, the other way. This is 0.5. Oh, I see. US oil. Oh, 0.5 and 0.2. Sorry. 0.25. Yes. Okay. And maximum US oil is no. That's the okay. So this is some product of this. Oh, sorry. This with this, and we fix all of these. Fix this and fix this. Okay. Copy it over here, and this is less than equal. All of them are less than equal to, no? This is 80,000. This is 700, and this is 1,000. And this is our objective function. Oh, sorry, green is better. Okay, yeah. Oh, I see what happened. 800. No, that's the final value. In the problem, it's 1000. The final value we'll get is 800. That's there. Okay, so let's solve it. We're maximizing the wrong thing. It should be here. Okay, we're maximizing this. These are the variables, and all the constraints are less than. So these are less than equal to these. Okay. LPP, solve, and sensitivity. Okay, so same thing. 800 units. Notice that this is not binding, whereas the other two are binding, which is same thing as what they got. Huh? Right. So that this 200 slack is the difference between left-hand side and right-hand side. Okay. All right, and let's see our dual values in comparison. Yes, marginal rate of return is 9.3%. And what is this to 1.33? So if I increase my maximum risk tolerance by 1 unit, how much does my return increase by? 1.33. So it's like the trade-off between risk and return at the optimal solution. Okay, so all right, so that's what this 1.33 here means, and these are the coefficients. So again, this can be between 3 and 2.5 and 10, and this is between 1.5 and 6. As long as the returns are in this range, the solution remains optimal, and this is our RHS range. So between 80,000 minus 15,000 is 65,000 and 1,40,000. The solution, these dual values will remain constant. Okay, marginal rate of return and risk return trade-off will remain constant. And here this is from 400 to 775 risk rating. Again, these dual values remain constant. Okay, so let's go back to the question and see. Optimal solution, value of annual return, we found out. The first two constraints, funds available and risk maximum, so are binding. What does that mean? That means we've used up all the funds available to us and we've reached the maximum risk that we are allowed to take in our portfolio. What are the dual values? We've already interpreted. Would it be beneficial to increase the maximum amount invested in US oil? The answer is no, because anyway we're not using that much. Right? We're only using, or we've only invested 800 shares, not 1,000. So no, it's not. How much would the return of US oil have to increase before it's beneficial to increase investment in this stock? Okay. Now, that goes to the RHS ranges. So what is the RHS range here? So currently it's 3. It can go up to 10 without changing. Beyond 10, it changes. Okay, beyond 10 it changes. So let's do that here because we can't do that there. So suppose I increase this to 10. So what will happen now? Now this is very more lucrative. So we'll try to put all our investment in US oil. But now what will happen? Now we cannot do that because there's a limit on the maximum number of shares of US oil. No? That will come into play. So everything will change now. Okay, no, not 10. 10.25. Okay, slightly more than 10. It has to be more than 10. Okay. Okay. So what will happen now? Let's see. Okay, if we solve it, what has happened now? Now notice we're trying to put as much in US steel as possible, but now this limit comes into play. So we cannot put all of that in US steel, US oil because of that. So what do? We reach the maximum, and unfortunately, because the risk has increased that much, we cannot use up all of the investment also. That drops down to 65,000. So notice, because of this limitation, we cannot use up all of the, and because of the risk problem, we cannot use up all of that. And so we now buy 10.25 unit cells, oh sorry,